Oh, hello. This is Elton. So, to everyone watching this video, thank you. This is my 400 subscriber special, and I'm just really grateful for all your support. It takes quite a bit of time for me to put this stuff out simply because I only have an iPad and a computer. So I really am happy when any of you just watch. Honestly, watching these videos is enough for me, so I just hope that this one is very much to your liking. This video did take quite a while to make, as I needed to think long and hard about some of the more recent units in Genshin to include. I also had to write out essentially an 18-page long script about this, so I wouldn't mess up when I wanted to say something and what I wanted to say. I'll also probably do another video like this, but for the 4.0 update to whatever update is before 5.0 to not make it as lengthy. So without further ado, here are the must-build, quote-unquote, 4 stars from 1.0 to 3.6. However, before we start, there are a few things I do need to say. I must put in a disclaimer, because if I don't, someone is going to criticize me for saying that I'm trying to shame or insult other players and whatever characters they play. So, I just wanted to say that this is me analyzing a character's kit in terms of their utility, function, and purpose in the state of this game. I'm not saying that anyone is better because they play these characters, nor am I saying that anyone is worse because they don't. This is me objectively looking at the facts, drawing a conclusion, and presenting them to you all as is. Like Sherlock Holmes, Scooby-Doo, or Blue's Clues, whichever one you prefer. At the end of the day, on whatever hemisphere of the Earth that you're on, you can play whoever you want, however you want, and that's completely fine. The point of a game is meant to give you enjoyment, and as there is quite little joy in the world, I can only hope that you at least enjoy Genshin the way you like. Now that has all been said and done, I shall proceed discussing the 4 stars in the order of the elements in the Genshin loading screen. So first up is Pyro. I'll start off with Bennett. Now, as we all know, Bennett is the most unlucky person ever. However, in terms of how good his kit is, he's arguably the best support ever. Bennett is an off-field healer, battery, and support. Passion Overload, his elemental skill, is a pretty simple forward slash of pyro damage when tapping, and while there are other levels of his skill that you can use, they aren't really all that suitable for the design role of his kit. His skill is a short cooldown that allows you to quickly swap to him during rotations to build energy for himself and his teammates. His first passive decreases his cooldown by 20%, allowing you to spam a skill for more energy. All charge levels and hits of his skill have no ICD. His elemental burst is the shining part of his kit. When Bennett uses Fantastic Voyage, he throws his inspiration field on the ground, creating a circle that heals the active character within it to at least higher than 70% HP. When their HP is above 70%, the active character will gain a massive attack buff depending on Bennett's base attack. This circle also happens to apply Pyro onto the active character. His second passive allows the cooldown of Bennett's skill to be decreased by an extra 50% while he's within the burst. It also allows him not to be launched by the charge of his skill, you know, the one that sends him flying with a backward flip. The initial hit of Pyro when Bennett activates his burst, as well as the Pyro applied to the character, has no ICD.
Benny's adventure team, assemble!
His first constellation is his most important one. It allows him to buff the active character's attack regardless of what their health is, and allows for an additional 20% attack buff from Bennett's base attack. This allows for more consistent buffing when the active character is not on the field. When is on the field, not needing to wait until they are at least 70% health. His C2 makes his energy recharge go up by 30% when his health is under 70%. C3 increases his skill level by 3, being a minimal damage increase. His C4 allows you to perform an extra follow-up attack when you use his charge level 2, dealing 135% of the second attack's damage when you tap a normal attack. C5 increases his burst by 3 levels, increasing his attack buffing and healing. And C6 gives a Pyro infusion to the active character when they are a sword, polearm, and claymore character while in his inspiration field, while giving everyone on it a 50% pyro damage bonus. The bonus applies to everyone on this burst, even to catalysts and bows like Yanfei and Yoimiya, but the infusion only applies to melee weapon users. Most main DPSs deal damage based on attack, so taking advantage of Bennett's attack buffing capabilities just completely skyrockets their damage output. His burst already gives an insane attack boost, and being that he is half a Pyro resonance, all you really need is a second Pyro unit to get an extra 25% attack applied to everyone. His best support artifact set is Noblesse Oblige. which the 4-piece is perfect for Bennett. It gives an extra 20% attack boost to all teammates after the equipped character uses their elemental burst, and it lasts for 12 seconds, which just so happens to be the duration of Bennett's burst. Looking at his kit, Bennett is a no-brainer of why he's used so much. He's a perfect healer support for almost any team. Speaking of Pyro resonance, it's time to move on to the other half of it. Now, Xiangling is almost unusable without Bennett. Well, not really. I'll admit that was a bit of an exaggeration, but at the very least she is very uncomfortable to play without her and Bennett on the same team. Xiangling's kit is very forward. All you want to do is just build enough energy for a burst by the time her cooldown is done, so that you can unleash your Pyronado, a spinning wheel of fire circling the active character. Xiangling's elemental skill, Guoba Attack, isn't very good. First, she drops her longtime friend Guoba, and he sprays fire in front of him 4 times, targeting enemies nearby. All of Guoba's hits have no ICD, but despite that, his skill really produces very little particles for Xiangling's bulky burst cost, and it has the very common occurrence of completely whiffing on opponents by having them move away or having the flame not reach far enough. This is somewhat resolved by her passive that increases Guoba's flame range by 20%. When Guoba disappears, he drops a pepper at his last location. This chili pepper lasts for 10 seconds, and when it's picked up, it would increase the character's attack, if you picked it up, by 10% for 10 seconds. Just a lovely triple 10 right there. Additionally, this chili pepper's attack bonus can be used for skills, or burst second snapshot. Xiangling's Pyronado is what really comes to play though. Her burst deals an insane amount of pyro damage while also being an off-field applicator of pyro. It has no ICD, or internal cooldown, but when it can proc elemental reactions, allowing every hit to trigger a pyro-related reaction. Even after switching off of Xiangling, her burst remains present, swirling around other characters. This gave it the use of being able to proc reactions off-field, and Xiangling's Pyronado was the example used by many creators and other YouTubers to explain exactly what snapshotting meant. When Xiangling was on Bennett's burst, her attack got a massive buff, and when she used her burst while still on the circle, by the third swing of it, before it circles the character, it would snapshot whatever attack stat that Xiangling had, and have Pyronado do damage based on that, even if the attack buff went away, or if she stepped outside of the circle. Her C1 allows for a minimal DPS increase, but for a very short amount of time, giving Guoba the ability to shred pyro resistance on enemies by 15% for 6 seconds. This, again, can completely whiff, as Guoba's flame attack is quite unpredictable, not always hitting opponents. C2 gives an extra application of pyro with Xiangling's last normal attack in her normal attack sequence, by placing an implode status onto an enemy for 2 seconds. After that time has passed, 75% of Xiangling's attack will be dealt as AoE pyro damage, having no ICD. C3 increases the level of her burst by 3, increasing her Pyronado damage. C4 is the best consolation you can get for her though. It increases the duration of her Pyronado by 40%, making it last a total of 14 seconds. C5 increases her elemental skill by 3 levels, and gives Guoba a bit of a DPS increase, given if he actually connects his attack with enemies. And C6 gives a 15% pyro damage bonus to everyone for the entire duration of Pyronado. It's important to note, however, that this does not apply to Pyronado itself upon activation. All in all, Xiangling can deal pretty high amounts of pyro damage, and she doesn't even need to be on field for it. This has made quite the point of contention whenever there's a new pyro main DPS around the corner that Hoyo's trying to drip market. The question was simple and fair to ask. Was playing an on-field pyro main DPS worth over having an off-field pyro sub DPS that could compete in damage? Now, obviously Xiangling isn't doing any 1 million burst hits or whatever like those new Hu Tao showcases, but I'm sure you can still understand my point. Why play on field when you can just sit back and relax with Xiangling? It was high damage with the comfort of mindless big booty damage. Moving on to Hydro. Xingqiu is the obvious no-brainer must build for this element. Him and Bennett are pretty much almost always debated as the best units in the game. Xingqiu's elemental skill, Guhua Sword, Fatal Rain Screen, is a double hit of Hydro damage, one horizontal strike followed by a vertical one. Activating this skill will summon the max amount of Rain Swords, and they'll follow your active character. The Rain Swords provide resistance to interruption while also mitigating some of the damage taken by the character. When damage is taken, one Rain Sword will be used up. Additionally, 20% of Xingqiu's Hydro damage bonus will be converted into additional damage reduction. Using the skill will apply the wet status, so do be careful around cryo enemies and attacks. His first passive also allows his rain swords to heal the active character based on 6% of Xingqiu's max HP per sword, when they are destroyed or when their duration expires. Xingqiu's skill produces a lot of energy particles for himself and his team, massively benefiting everyone, especially since his burst cost is on the higher end. Most types of his skill have no ICD, while further applications of his skill, such as running into opponents with the sword's active, do apply Hydro, but they do abide by the regular ICD. His elemental burst, Fuhua Sword Rain Cutter, summons the maximum number of rain swords, but these rain swords remain for the duration of Xingqiu's burst, the entirety of it. These rain swords retain all the defensive probabilities of Xingqiu's elemental skill. His burst also remains active even if you swap off of him. During his burst, you are able to trigger coordinated rain sword attacks when your active character performs normal attacks, dealing Hydro damage. Xingqiu's burst abides by a standard of ICD of 2.5 seconds or 3 hits. Xingqiu's second passive also just straight up gives him an extra 20% Hydro damage bonus, further boosting his damage. His C1 increases the max number of rain swords able to be summoned, making it 4. His second constellation increases the duration of his burst by 3 seconds while also decreasing the Hydro resistance of enemies to be shredded by 15% for 4 seconds when they are hit by sword rain attacks by his burst. C3 increases the level of his burst by 3. His fourth constellation increases the damage of his skill by 50% when his burst is active. C5 increases the level of the skill by 3 levels, making him deal more damage as a sub-DPS. And C6 lets every third coordinated Hydro attack from his burst shoot out 5 swords, generating 3 energy for Xingqiu on these specific hits. This last constellation is able to reduce a decent chunk of his ER needs and allows for a lot more comfort. Xingqiu's Hydro application is honestly quite unparalleled with any other unit in the game. Even his 5-star counterpart, Yuan, doesn't apply as much Hydro as him. Hydro is the glue of a lot of different teams, and Xingqiu is able to work in almost every single one of them, and quite flawlessly at that. As long as the active character normal attacks, Xingqiu is able to provide Hydro. Additionally, the resistance to interruption allows her main DPSs to have a lot easier time dishing out damage without much worry of being knocked back, while the partial healing from his first passive helps the party get by with just enough healing. Sucrose! One of my favorites in the game. She is the next character of the next element, Anemo. Now, as we all know, Anemo is an amazing support element, simply because of how it's able to spread elements around, causing them to interact further. And the Viridescent set that gives a massive 40% resistance shred to the element that was swirled onto enemies. Sucrose's elemental skill, a stable animal hypostasis creation, 6308, good god, what a frightful mouthful, summons a circle that sweeps inward, dealing animal damage to opponents within the AoE. This attack is able to group enemies together while also combining the elements on them through a swirl reaction. Her burst, Forbidden Creation, Isomer 75, Type 2. Again, just so many words, Mr. Grinch, so many words. Summons a large wind spirit that drags opponents to its center for the entirety of its duration. Sucrose's burst can also absorb an element, dealing additional elemental damage because of it, the elements being Hydro, Pyro, Electro, and Cryo, of course. Her skill and burst also has no ICD, and knowing how Swirl works and how broken it is, this is a massive advantage. Additionally, the burst has no ICD for the absorbed element as well. Her 2 passes are very strong, in how they can use to buff other characters. The first passive that she has is able to give 50 elemental mastery for 8 seconds to all characters in the party, excluding herself, when she triggers a swirl reaction. It is important to note that this passive does not affect any other Anemo characters, and this buff can exist for different elements at the same time with their own independent timers. Hoyo is aware of how broken Anemo is. Very, very much aware. Her second passive is able to give 20% of her own EM to everyone in the party, also excluding herself for 8 seconds, when her skill or burst hits opponents. C1 gives Sucrose a massive additional charge to her skill. This allows you to activate her skill twice in a row, essentially resolving a good amount of her ER issues at C0, given that her burst cost is 80. C2 increases the duration of her burst by 2 seconds. C3 increases the level of her skill by 3. Her fourth constellation allows her to shave time on the cooldown of her skill by 1 to 7 seconds every 7 normal or charged attack that Sucrose does. This further resolves her ER issues and provides a lot more energy for her teammates. There was one Abyss cycle where I could not 9-star it. And then I got C4 Sucrose. She was the one that was able to help me clear it. It was the one with the crazy chamber that had the Pyro Lector, Electro Lector, and the Hydro Herald. If y'all remember that one, yikers. That was, oh, I hated that. Everyone hated that. But anyways, I digress. C5 increases her burst by 3 levels, and her final constellation gives party members a 20% elemental damage bonus who have the same element that was absorbed in Sucrose's burst. Sucrose, being a catalyst, is able to keep up Viridescent's resistant shred by constantly applying Anemo through her attacks. This makes her the perfect driver for other party members who have off-field bursts and skills like Xingqiu's aforementioned burst. She's able to constantly shred resistance while also getting additional EM, allowing for higher reaction damage when she unites different elements using her attacks. Moving on to Electro, we have 2 characters to discuss. The first is Fischl, the Prinzessin herself. Fischl is an off-field Electro sub-DPS with the capabilities of applying fast and frequent Electro onto specific enemies. Fischl's elemental skill summons her companion Oz, a Night Raven, dealing a small AoE of Electro damage upon cast, and will stay on field dealing Electro damage to an enemy that he targets. You can hold Fischl's skill for better aiming of where you want to place down Oz. The damage that occurs when summoning Oz has no ICD. If Fischl shoots a fully charged shot at Oz, he can summon a hit of Electro damage from the sky, dealing 152.7% of the arrow's damage. This damage has no ICD, and that also happens to be her first passive. This is an interesting way to play Fischl, but it's ultimately very clunky to play, so it's not really recommended, and hitting Oz is a bit of a tough task to do. Fischl's second passive allows for an extra hit of Electro damage, dealing 80% of Fischl's attack when the active character triggers an Electro reaction while Oz is still on the field. This can occur once every 0.5 seconds and also has no ICD. Before 3.0 and the introduction of playable Dendro characters, Fischl was already a solid option for Electro-related teams. However, post 3.0, Fischl's pretty much necessary in an aggravate team, and also like a really solid option for any spread and hyperbloom teams. This second passive takes advantage of aggravate teams, letting the extra damage to always aggravate as long as Quicken is on the target, and increases DPS pretty significantly. During the burst, Midnight Phantasmagoria, Fischl transforms into Oz herself, and is able to fly around the field for a short period of time, moving swiftly while doing so. When she gets near opponents, Oz will deal electro damage to them, but only once in this form. When the burst ends, or when she is swapped out, Oz will be at the last place on the field, and will have the same duration from Fischl's skill. If Oz is previously on field upon activation, this will reset Oz's duration on field. Fischl's burst abides by ICD of 5 hits, or 5 seconds. Fischl's first constellation helps her in being played in a very niche physical main DPS. It also happens to be the way that YaoYao kind of marketed her a little bit, based on her signature weapon. When Oz is not on field and Fischl does a normal attack, Oz's Raven Eyes can fire a coordinated attack dealing physical damage equal to 22% of Fischl's attack. This only occurs when Fischl is in battle and has locked onto an enemy through her normal attacks. These coordinated attacks also have homing capabilities, and the damage that is dealt to them is considered normal attack damage. C2 allows her elemental skill to deal 200% extra attack as damage upon activation, and the AoE of Oz's auto-targeting is increased by 50%. C3 increases her skills level by 3. Her C4 gives more sustainability to Fischl. Her burst deals 222% of her attack as electro damage when it is first used and when her burst ends. Fischl is able to recover 20% of her own health. The extra damage dealt abides by 5 seconds or 4 hit ICD. Her fifth constellation adds 3 levels to her burst. And the last constellation is by far the best. First, it extends Oz's duration on the field by 2 seconds, and when Oz is on the field, he can perform coordinated attacks and deal 30% of Fischl's attack as electro damage when the active character does normal attacks. This damage is counted as elemental skill damage. This constellation greatly increases Fischl's DPS, as this ability can be procced as fast as the normal attack happens of whatever active character you have on the field. So, Gromia, Ayato, you get the idea. The ICD of these additional coordinated attacks, however, still do follow the regular 5 seconds or 4 hits ICD. As you can see, Fischl deals high off-field damage extremely quickly. The only not so great thing is that it's very strictly single target. However, her amount of Electro application in terms of frequency is essentially unmatched. With so many damage instances coming from her kit, all of those numbers add up to a significant amount of damage. Plus her uptime on Oz is literally perfect, with her burst refreshing his duration. Going on to the second Electro character, we have Kuki Shinobu. Now, if you haven't known by now, Kuki has had a bit of an epic redemption after the release of playable Dendro. Kuki was quite the underwhelming unit, since despite being first healer of its own element, Electro, there was not much else she could do. Her Electro application was honestly quite abysmal compared to her counterparts, specifically Fischl, and her support capabilities outside of healing were essentially non-existent. Additionally, her kit seemed to skew towards Elemental Mastery, which was pretty much a useless stat for Electro characters pre-3.0, since Electro reactions were pretty terrible and could never crit. After Dendro released, however, she became the free-to-play poster child for potentially the most broken meta team in the entire game. But first, let's discuss her kit. Kuki's elemental skill, Sanctifying Ring, creates a grass ring of sanctification that will follow the active character and deal AoE electro damage to opponents while simultaneously healing the active character based on the percentage of Kuki's max HP, every 1.5 seconds. The activation of the skill will drain a portion of Kuki Shinobu's HP, which can only bring her down to 20% HP in total. Additionally, her second passive increases the healing from her skill and the damage dealt by 75% and 25% respectively, both based on her elemental mastery. This grass ring abides by a regular ICD of 2.5 seconds and or 3 hits. Kuki's burst, Goe Narukami Kariyama Right, hope I said that right, creates a short AoE circle of a multi-hit electro attack from the ground that deals damage based on max HP. If Kuki is at 50% health or lower, the field will last 3.5 seconds instead of the standard 2 seconds, making it last a lot longer. Despite having such an insane multi-hit with what looks like an abundance of electro application, her burst still falls within the same regular ICD. This is even more bizarre as the attribute scaling of her burst is explained the same way as Amber's, specifically the per hit damage and the total hit damage, yet nevertheless follows normal ICD. This is quite odd since Amber's burst doesn't have ICD, so go figure. And as for her first passive, her healing bonus is increased by 15% when her HP isn't above 50%. Kuki's first constellation increases the AoE of her burst by 50%, having more range. C2 increases the duration of her elemental skill by 3 seconds, making the duration and the cooldown exactly the same, therefore giving ensured uptime of her skill. This will be Kuki's most important constellation as it gives consistent AoE electro and healing to your teammates. C3 increases the level of her elemental skill by 3. C4 allows for an extra hit of electro to be applied to enemies every 5 seconds when the normal, charged, or plunging attacks of the active character hit opponents while under the effects of Kuki's Grass Ring of Sanctification. This hit, also known as a Thundergrass mark, will deal AoE damage and is based on 9.7% of Shinobu's max HP. This Thundergrass mark has no ICD and could potentially trigger another Electro-related reaction. C5 gives 3 extra levels to her burst, and C6 is a Hu Tao-esque constellation, allowing her to tank a fatal blow, not dying in battle, and will occur as her HP hits 1. Additionally, when her HP is below 25%, she will have her EM increase by 150 for 15 seconds. Both of these aforementioned effects can occur once every 60 seconds with separate timers. As you can see, Kuki's kit seems relatively lackluster in terms of how she works. I mean, seriously, a healer that hurts herself? Like, that has to be just some sort of joke, paired with the fact that she didn't offer much of anything else in terms of damage or support. You can see why people ignored her at release. However, after Dendro was added, Hyperbloom was soon discovered to be an extremely broken meta team. It was when blooms, created by Hydro and Dendro, come in contact with each other and then being hit by Electro. While the damage from the hyper blooms could not crit, it did offer consistent and frequent damage in the form of these nature-themed tracer missiles. Additionally, while Kuki's skill did follow regular ICD, each Dendro core had their own, so Hyper Bloom found a loophole. The interesting thing about these Hyper Blooms was that their damage relied solely on the character's EM, specifically the one who was triggering it, and the character level of that character, along with a few select artifact sets that include Hyper Bloom in their 4-piece descriptions. This is where Kuki's second passive comes in, where she gains increased healing based on EM. Additionally, this team also required quick and frequent applications of Dendro, Hydro, and Electro, and just as luck would have it, Kuki had consistent enough Electro application in the form of her skill, with just enough time to have blooms created for her skill to then trigger Hyper Bloom. Having access to a broken new team with the security of consistent healing in just one unit was realized to be amazing, and building her full EM wasn't copium, as her healing was still substantial enough to keep the whole team alive. Kuki's streamline of EM into her healing and a unique way of doing damage was what redeemed her utility and usage, making her an amazing free-to-play Hyper Bloom driver. Moving on to the newest element in the roster, YaoYao is the one to talk about. YaoYao was teased very early in the game, but she has only been released just this year during Lantern Rite. Being Dendro's first healer, YaoYao really had to step up to the plate and fulfill some pretty high expectations. During YaoYao's elemental skill, Rafinous Sky Cluster, she summons her friend Yuegui onto the field. This skill can be held to throw Yuegui at a fixed distance. While Yuegui is on the field, it will throw out white jade radishes, and when they hit opponents or characters, they will deal Dendro damage to opponents, and heal characters within that AoE based on YaoYao's max HP. If the radishes do not come in contact with either character or opponent, it will stay on the ground and it will explode after the duration expires. Yuegui can cause radishes to auto-target, and this changes depending on the character's health. If all characters nearby have more than 70% HP, then it will auto-target opponents. And if characters' health are less than 70%, or at 70%, then it will target the characters with the lowest health. And if no opponents are around, then Yuegui will just target characters if they are not at full health. These white jade radishes follow a 2.5 second cooldown. In Moonjade Descent, she deals Dendro damage to nearby opponents to kickstart her burst, and then enters the Adepto Legacy state. During this state, white jade radishes will have a different damage multiplier that abides by YaoYao's burst, not her skill. It will also summon more Yueguis at intervals until the max amount has been reached, which is 3, specifically from the burst. YaoYao's movement speed is increased by 50%, and her Dendro resistance is increased by a whopping 50%. All this happens for a short duration of 5 seconds. The initial damage has no ICD, while the ICD for radishes from her burst follow a 1.5 second timer. Her first passive allows YaoYao to constantly throw out white jade radishes during the 5-second duration of her burst whenever she is sprinting, running, or jumping. One white jade radish can be thrown this way every 0.6 seconds. This passive is very useful for more Dendro application to ensure reaction uptime. Her second passive allows the active character to recover HP based on 0.8% of YaoYao's max HP every 1 second when a white jade radish explodes. This second passive lasts 5 seconds. YaoYao's constellations offer more quality of life aspects to her kit, which is genuinely quite nice. Her C1 gives the active character 15% Dendro damage bonus and 15% stamina whenever white jade radishes explode. The stamina restoration can only happen every 5 seconds this way. This constellation usually benefits spread teams with main DPSs such as Tignari, Alhaitham, and Nahida, if you choose to play her that way. Talk about Nahida, of course. C2 states that while YaoYao is in her burst, she will gain 3 energy when white jade radishes hit opponents. This energy regeneration from a C2 can only occur every 0.8 seconds. Sorry, 0.8 seconds. Her constellation, her third one specifically, increases the level of her skill by 3. C4 increases YaoYao's elemental mastery by 0.3% of max HP for 8 seconds after her skill or burst is used, with the max EM gain this way being 120. This offers some small damage increase for whatever Dendro reaction team she is being put in. C5 gives 3 extra levels to her burst, and her final constellation allows her to apply a bit more Dendro. For every 2 white jade radishes tossed out by Yogui, a Mega Radish will get thrown and will have a larger AoE when dealing damage. The Mega Radish will also deal 75% of YaoYao's attack as AoE Dendro damage, and will heal the active character based on 7.5% of YaoYao's max HP. Each Yogui can only throw out 2 of these Mega Radishes, and these Mega Radishes have no ICD. Again, YaoYao had a lot to live up to as Dendro's first healer, and she really didn't disappoint. YaoYao's kit offers great survivability with her consistent healing without sacrificing some of the good Dendro application. Her constellations provide help with general support and quality of life, making it easier to get her burst, some reaction benefits, and a bit of extra Dendro application. I'm pretty sure it's safe to say that YaoYao is a great unit to build. Nearing the end of the must builds, we have Cryo. As for the first person, we have Diona, the lovable Prohibition campaigner. As a defensive support unit, Diona has an immense amount of coverage in terms of what she can do. Diona's elemental skill, Icy Paws, shoots out hits of cryo damage and summons a shield that can protect your active character. Depending on how you use it, it has different effects. When tapping her skill, Diona will shoot out 2 Icy Paws, and when holding, she will leap back and shoot out 5. The shield created when holding will gain a 75% damage absorption bonus in addition to the base 250% cryo damage bonus absorption that the shield already has. Summoning the shield will also apply cryo to the active character for a brief moment in time. The duration of the shield depends on each Icy Pod that hits enemies, and the duration per hit goes up with the talent level increase. Each Icy Pod will produce 1 cryo particle when connecting with an opponent, generating 5 particles when holding, and 10 if and when Sacrificial Bow is equipped to Diona, and its passive happens to proc. Diona's first passive also gives a 10% increase in movement speed and a 10% decrease in stamina consumption to characters protected by her shield. Her Icy Paws follow the 3-hit ICD. Signature Mix, Diona's Burst, is an AoE circle of cryo damage that will create a Drunken Mist. The Drunken Mist will heal active characters and deal cryo damage to opponents within the AoE whenever it pulses. Her second passive also decreases the attack of opponents who have been hit by the pulsing of Signature Mix by 10% for 15 seconds. Don't know why this says when they enter, but they actually need to be hit by it, so I don't understand why it was phrased this sort of way. The pulsing damage of her burst also abides by the 3-hit ICD. Diona's first constellation gives her back 15 energy when her burst ends. This is amazing at helping her energy generation, essentially lowering her burst cost from 80 to 65. C2 increases the damage of her Icy Paws and the damage absorption by 15% while also generating shields for nearby characters when they hit opponents. These co-op shields have a 50% of Icy Paws damage absorption and only last for 5 seconds. C3 increases the level of her burst by 3, granting more healing all around. Her fourth constellation is an interesting one, which allows an option for Diona to be played as a main DPS. It reduces the charge time of her aim shots by 60% when she is in the AoE of her burst. Her C5 increases the level of her skill by 3, giving a stronger shield. And C6 grants characters in the AoE of her burst a 30% incoming healing bonus when their HP is 50% or under. And it will grant a 200 EM bonus to any characters who are within the circle but are above 50% HP. Diona's utility and coverage is truly insane. She's a great support for many teams that focus on a cryo DPS. Danyu, Eula, and Ayaka have tougher times getting their burst, more so than the latter two specifically, being that both Eula and Ayaka have 80 burst costs. Diona's cryo particle generation is extremely beneficial to them. Additionally, all of her extra support tidbits from movement speed increase, stamina consumption decrease, and bonus EM are all amazing. The only thing that Diona is really lacking in any form of offensive geared support is just damage, but everything else is just pretty damn good. Speaking of more offense, Rosaria is the other cryo must build. Rosaria is a super solid sub DPS with a pretty interesting kit. In my opinion, I feel like Rosaria is pretty underrated, especially since her kit is pretty cohesive, powerful, and versatile. Rosaria's elemental skill, Ravaging Convection, is pretty similar to Xingqiu's, in which she does a double hit of cryo damage after appearing behind her opponent. If her opponent is a larger enemy, then she will just perform the attack in front of them. Her 2 hits have no ICD, allowing for 2 cryo-related reactions to occur. Additionally, Rosaria will not generate any particles unless the second slash of her attack hits a minimum of 1 enemy. Rosaria's first passive also gives herself a 10% increase in crit rate for 5 seconds when she hits someone with her skill from behind. Her burst, Rites of Termination, will deal 2 hits of cryo damage as she raises her Ice Lance and pile drives it into the ground. When it hits the ground, it will create an AoE circle that deals cryo damage to surrounding opponents in intervals. All of these hits from her burst also have no ICD. Her second passive also increases the crit rate of all nearby characters by 15% of Rosaria's own crit rate for 10 seconds. The crit rate bonus given to all nearby characters can't be greater than 15%. Essentially, 100% crit rate on Rosaria must be achieved to impart the maximum crit rate bonus onto teammates. Rosaria's C1 increases her attack speed and her normal attack damage by 10% for 4 seconds when she deals a critical hit. This constellation gives you the option of playing Rosaria as an on-field main DPS. C2 increases the duration of her burst by 4 seconds. C3 increases her skill level by 3, and her fourth constellation gives 5 energy to herself whenever her skill lands a crit hit. This can only happen each time Rosaria uses her skill. C5 increases her burst by 3 levels, and her sixth constellation offers some niche physical support by having her burst reduce opponents' physical resistance by 20% for 10 seconds. Looking at her kit, Rosaria is pretty powerful. Knowing that every hit of Cryo that she does has no ICD, and given her pretty substantial damage multipliers, that means she can hit pretty hard. And also, she has a short cooldown, so battering Cryo main DPSs is still viable. Additionally, she also has some unique ability to constantly buff crit rate, whether it's her own or the rest of her team. And now to the last element in the game. We have Geo. Now, I will admit, when I thought of this video, I didn't really think I would be including anyone from Geo, since, honestly speaking, the only Geo that ever really seems necessary is Xiangling, and he's a 5-star character. However, after some critical thinking, long consideration, and a much-needed bowl of spicy noodles later, they were very, very yummy, I ultimately decided on Yunjin. Yunjin is a support character that uniquely focuses on increasing the damage of normal attacks by streamlining defense, a pretty much useless stat except for almost all the Geo characters, and a few others outside of the elements, which we will not be talking about, into something actually useful. Her elemental skill is a parry that absorbs damage based on her max HP, while dealing damage based on a percentage of her defense. This parry shield has a 150% extra damage absorption against all elemental and physical damage. Additionally, her skill can be held to release different levels of damage. Her first passive allows her skill to release the charge level 2 when she uses her skill at the exact moment she is attacked. Her skill has no ICD, although this is unimportant to note as Crystallize doesn't do any damage, at least no reaction damage. Her burst is where her true abilities come forward. Yunjin deals AoE Geo damage around her and bestows the Flying Cloud flag formation to all nearby party members. During this flag formation, all of the normal attacks dealt by characters will be increased based on a percentage of Yunjin's current defense. The amount of times normal attacks can be buffed this way has a trigger quota of 30 hits, and one normal attack that hits multiple opponents will trigger the quota multiple times. Each party member has their own separate 30-hit trigger quota. The initial AoE Geo damage that Yunjin does also has no ICD. Additionally, the normal attack bonus from her burst is further increased by 2.5%, 5%, 7.5%, and 11.5% of her defense when the party member is made up of 1, 2, 3, or 4 different elemental types, respectively. That is her second passive. Her C1 decreases the cooldown of her skill by 18%. Yunjin's second constellation gives everyone an additional 15% normal attack damage increase for 12 seconds when her burst is activated. C3 increases her burst level by 3, giving more normal attack bonus. C4 increases her defense by 20% for 12 seconds when she triggers a crystallize reaction. This is usually best triggered by using her burst and then her skill immediately to ensure at least one of those Geo attacks triggers a reaction, as well to get energy. C5 increases the level of her skill by 3, and C6 increases the normal attack speed of characters who have been buffed by Yunjin's burst by 12%. So, looking at Yunjin's kit, it seems pretty niche by focusing on normal attacks, especially when the only cases I can see her being used frequently would be in teams that focus on Mia, Ayato, and maybe Hu Tao if you don't have Beidou for her Vape double Geo team, so you just throw in Yunjin, so you might as well buff her normal attacks as well. And even if there are other teams where main DPSs rely on normal attacks a lot, or could include her, there are just other units that could be placed in who would probably be more beneficial. However, I'm looking at Yunjin as a character that would be used more in the future. With more regions being released and more units being, drip marketed, there are bound to be more main DPSs who will favor using normal attacks as the main source of their damage, and Yunjin will potentially be a really great option for them. As you can see, a lot of these units are amazing some DPSs and or supports for a lot of teams, increasing team damage and even adding some of their own. And while having their constellations make them quite a lot better, they honestly don't need them, as they are complete and functional units at C0. And given that you can pair a lot of these 10 characters above in teams of 4, shows that you also don't really need a main DPS, and that sometimes supports can just really carry themselves. Now, moving on to the final part, we have honorable mentions. Yes, I did include an honorable mentions part, because these 4 stars do deserve a shout out for what they can do. The only reason I didn't include them above is because of one or more couple issues that bring them down quite a bit. At first honorable mention goes out to Thoma. Thoma is a great shield character that can pretty consistently apply Pyro with his burst. With a stacking mechanic that is pretty easy to work with, he can actually provide the second strongest shields in the entire game, rivaling Xiangling. Thoma's elemental skill, Blazing Blessing, summons a blazing barrier with a stripper-like kick on his polearm, dealing AoE pyro damage and shields the active character. When cast, Thoma will apply pyro to himself. The blazing barrier's damage absorption is based on a percentage of Thoma's max HP, and has a 250% extra damage absorption towards pyro damage. Additionally, when another blazing barrier is obtained or refreshed, the remaining damage absorption of the old one will stack with the new one. The max damage absorption of this cannot exceed a certain amount and increases with the level of the talent. The hit of this skill also has no ICD. When Thoma uses Crimson Uyuroi, he deals an initial hit of his AoE pyro damage, enters the Scorching Uyuroi state, and then goes into the true part of his burst. Whenever the active character uses a normal attack, a fiery collapse will trigger, dealing AoE pyro damage that sweeps from the ground. It will also create a new blazing barrier that has all the defensive properties of his elemental skill, specifically the stacking of the damage absorption and being more resistant to pyro damage. It will also inherit the max damage absorption as well. And while the initial cast of AoE pyro damage has no ICD, each blazing barrier generated from his burst follows a 2.5 seconds or 3 hits cooldown. Thoma's first passive gives the active character a 5% shield strength increase for 6 seconds whenever they refresh or obtain a blazing barrier, up to 30%. This can occur once every 0.3 seconds and has a maximum of 5 stacks. This passive greatly increases the durability of the shielding, especially when Thoma also needs to build ER to reliably get his burst back. Thoma's second passive increases the fiery collapses of his burst to do increased damage based on 2.2% of Thoma's max HP. Thoma's constellations are all of great help to getting his burst reliably. In his first constellation, when a character aside from Thoma gets attacked while a blazing barrier is shielding them, Thoma's cooldown of his skill and burst decreases by 3 seconds. This allows you to use his skill sooner, generating energy a lot easier. His C2 increases the duration of his burst by 3 seconds, increasing the amount of pyro he can apply. C3 increases the level of his skill by 3, and C4 grants 15 energy back to Thoma after he uses his burst, essentially bringing down his burst cost from 80 to 65, truly his best constellation. C5 increases the level of his burst by 3 levels, and C6 increases the damage of normal, charged, and plunging attacks of all characters by 15% for 6 seconds whenever a blazing barrier is refreshed or obtained. So, Thoma doesn't really sound like a terrible unit. He gives great defensive utility and applies pyro consistency, making him a great trigger for Burgeon. However, this is more of a Burgeon's place in the meta. Out of the 2 sub-reactions of Bloom, Hyper Bloom ends up being a lot better than Burgeon. In terms of how reactions work, Hyper Bloom auto-targets an enemy when triggered, causing the hit to essentially never miss unless the opponents are too far outside of the AoE of being targeted. Burgeon, however, is a spherical hitbox explosion of damage, meaning that opponents further away cannot get hit. Playing Burgeon teams also sometimes inadvertently trigger Burning, which is a Dendro reaction that has pretty lackluster damage to begin with, and then Hoya decided to lower its damage multipliers for some unintelligible reason. But also, it's not great when you want to create Dendro cores first and then light them ablaze. Ultimately, you can get some weird team where your Hydra unit is vaporizing pretty consistently on a burning target too. With Hyper Bloom, it doesn't really matter which element is applied first, in what order in the long run. It really doesn't interfere with creating Dendro cores that will then turn into lock-on rockets. Additionally, when looking at the two free other characters who lead these teams, Kuki Shinobu and, Thoma, Kuki has an easier time being built as she only needs to look out for two stats, EM and HP, while Thoma has to build EM, HP, and ER. This is because Kuki's way of triggering her game is relying on her skill, which, even before C2, has almost no downtime, C2 giving guaranteed consistent skill uptime, and any downtime of no Electro application can be sufficed by Kuki's very low energy Hungry Burst, being that it only needs 40 energy. With Thoma, you need to consistently build up his burst, and while that is more than suffice through something like an R5 Katane Cross Spear and or his C4, it's honestly a lot more taxing to play him in Burgeon or any other team. Additionally, there also happens to be no polearm of the Sacrificial series for some bizarre reason, as having that exist would definitely help Thoma's ER issues and shield stacking mechanic. And like I said before, the quote-unquote must-build 4-stars should feel comfortable and complete to play without constellations. Constellations are like makeup, if you will. It is there to enhance what beauty already exists. And sadly, the way Burgeon is set up, it just doesn't have the exact same ease of gameplay that Hyper Bloom does. So it's more of a reaction problem than it is sort of like Thoma's fault entirely. Going over to Electro, Kujo-Sara and Beidou will be the two that almost hit the criteria, but just fall short. Let's talk about Kujo-Sara first. She's an Electro support mainly meant for Electro main DPSs, specifically riding Shogun. She was one of the first niche supports to be introduced into the game and welcome into the meta, but she does have a few issues with her playstyle. Let's dive deeper into her kit. Tengu Stormcall is Kujo-Sara's elemental skill, in which she will teleport short distance backwards and enter the Crow Feather cover state for 18 seconds. When she is in the next state, the aimed shot that she does next will fire a Crow Feather at the location where the arrow landed. After a short time, it will explode, dealing electro damage to opponents within its AoE. It will also trigger Tengu Jurai Ambush for active characters within that same AoE and give them an attack bonus based off of Sarah's base attack. These attack bonuses cannot stack, and the duration of the attack bonus will depend on the last Tengu Jurai activated. The AoE explosion of the Tengu Jurai Ambush has no ICD. Also, notice how I differentiated Tengu Jurai and Tengu Jurai Ambush, as there are other versions of Tengu Jurai. I will explain. Both of these passives affect her skill. Her first passive, make the aim shot of her charge time decrease by 60% when Char shoots down the Crow Feather. This makes it a lot easier to obtain her attack buffing. This is still tough in battle, however, as you'll be able to be vulnerable in aim shot mode, so you can get knocked easily and probably, not survive. Her second passive restores 1.2 energy to all party members for every 100% energy recharge that she has when Tengu Jurai Ambush hits opponents. This effect can happen once every 3 seconds, and only once every 3 seconds. Sara's burst, Subjugation Kokoro Sendo, is an initial strike of Tengu Jurai Titan Breaker that crashes down from the sky, dealing AoE electro damage. After Tengu Jurai Titan Breaker finishes, it will immediately spread out into 4 cardinal directions of Tengu Jurai Storm Cluster, dealing smaller AoEs of electro damage. Each Tengu Jurai Storm Cluster hits 5 times, spreading out further in those directions. Tengu Jurai Titan Breaker and Tengu Jurai Storm Cluster can both grant the same attack bonus states in Sara's elemental skill, Tengu Storm Call. It also inherits the same limitation of not being able to stack these attack buffs from her skill. And while Tengu Jurai Titan Breaker is no ICD, Tengu Jurai Storm Cluster does have one that abides by the 2.5 seconds / 3 hits rule. As for her constellations, I really feel like she draws strength from them quite a lot, or at least I feel like a lot more than the other units listed in this video, personally in my opinion. For C1, whenever any of her Tengu Jurai grant characters attack bonuses or hits opponents, the cooldown of her skill goes down by 1. This can happen only once every 3 seconds. Not really anything that helps out with her massive burst cost, but with this very minimal cooldown reduction, it's not bad to have. C2 is her quality of life constellation. When using her elemental skill, she will leave a Crow Feather at the spot before she teleported backwards, dealing 30% of its original damage. This Crow Feather can impart the same attack buff from her skill and her burst. This mechanic makes it so much easier to play Sarah, since you don't need to go into your aim shot mode to give the next character that you play on field her attack buff. However, you will not gain energy from this way of using her skill to obtain the buff. You'll still have to shoot down the arrow, which I feel like just doesn't make any sense. That's where I have an issue. While I appreciate the quality of life that this gives, it just doesn't help in giving energy. C3 raises the level of her elemental skill by 3, and C4 increases the number of the smaller AoE hits of Tengu Jurai Storm Cluster from 4 to 6, giving a small DPS increase. C5 increases the level of her skill by 3, and her C6 is what truly makes her a dedicated Electro support. When a character has been buffed by any of her Tengu Jurai, their Electro crit damage is increased by 60%. This extra crit damage is a direct buff, so it can't be snapshotted to something like Beidou's Burst. Looking at how Sara works, you can clearly tell that she's definitely meant for Electro main DPSs. Again, specifically Raiden Shogun. This is also clearly shown through her attack buff for all of her Tengu Jurai only lasting 6 seconds, so any form of boosted attack has to be quick or within that window. When looking at the 4 current Electro main DPSs, 3 out of 4 can work. Raiden Shogun is a no-brainer despite her burst lasting 7 seconds, so 1 second more than Sara's attack buff, not even counting the few seconds of her burst animation. Raiden is still able to land her initial attack, which is arguably the most important in terms of damage. Yaimiko is also the same way. Her burst doesn't snapshot, so having Sara's buff her for a short duration is perfect for a short burst. Yaimiko's burst does a short hit of initial electro damage, followed by a few more depending on how many of her Sesho Sakura were active at the time of activation. And for Keqing, this is also the exact same. Her burst is a quick slash followed by a series of 8 multi-hits that last a few seconds. Although I've tried playing Keqing with Sara, and the energy generation is pretty abysmal to say the least. Sara definitely needs Raiden's help with energy funneling. Now, the Electro main DPS that doesn't work with Sara is Sino, as he needs to be on field for longer periods of time, so he ultimately wouldn't have that attack increase consistently. Now, you can debate that Sara isn't too niche, as she does increase attack, just like Bennett. But Sara's attack buff doesn't last long enough for many other main DPS outside of her element, not to mention if the element of Electro even works in those other teams. The convenient attack buffing is nice, since it does come from her skill and burst, but swapping in and out like that for your main DPS can present a lot of rotation problems, and in most cases a massive DPS drop. Honestly, if Sara was just able to give a longer duration of attack buffing, then she probably would be a must build. Getting to the last character in this entire list, we have Beidou. Now, Beidou is someone I actually really enjoy. I love her kit, I love the entire concept of it, and honestly, I have very little qualms with it. She's a great Electro sub DPS, and also an amazing off-field damage dealer like Fischl. Beidou's elemental skill, Tide Collar, is a parry shield that can tank damage and send it flying back. When tapping, she will just swing her claymore forward in an arc of electro damage. If she holds it, she will summon a temporary shield based on her max HP to tank damage dealt to her, and then swing it back dealing more electro damage. The greatest amount of damage bonus that can be gained is when Beidou tanks 2 hits with this shield. The shield has a 250% extra electro damage absorption, and applies electro onto Beidou when activated. The skill has no ICD. The first passive also allows you to deal the maximum damage bonus with her skill when you tap Tide Collar at the exact moment Beidou gets hit. And her second passive allows Beidou to deal increased normal and charge attack damage by 15%, and increases her normal and charge attack speed by 15%, and reduce the delay time of using her charge attacks. That's a lot. These buffs from her second passive occur for a duration of 10 seconds when she unleashes her skill with the maximum damage bonus. Beidou's Burst, Storm Collar, deals initial electro damage to nearby enemies and summons her Thunder Beast's Targe. The Thunder Beast's Targe follows the active character, and when normal and charge attacks connect with opponents, it will release a lightning discharge that will jump between opponents and deal electro damage. The Thunder Beast Targe also increases resistance interruption and decreases damage taken by the active character. Only 1 lightning discharge can be triggered per second. Before C2, the lightning discharge can only jump 2 times, dealing 3 hits, dealing the first hit to opponent A, bouncing to opponent B, dealing damage again, and then back to opponent A 1 final time. The activation of her burst is no ICD, while her lightning discharges follow the 2.5 second or 3 hits rule. C1 gives Beidou a shield when she uses her burst. It absorbs up to 60% of Beidou's max HP for 15 seconds and can absorb electro damage 250% more efficiently. This constellation is really beneficial for defensive utility. C2 is a massive damage increase to her kit. It allows the lightning discharges of her burst to jump to an additional 2 targets. So pre-C2, Beidou's lightning discharge could hit 3 times, but now it can hit 5 times. Her third constellation increases the level of her skill by 3, and C4 allows Beidou's normal attacks to deal additional damage, that is 20% Electro damage, for 10 seconds when she is attacked. This counts when she is attacked while her temporary shield from her skill is up. Interestingly enough, the additional Electro can also apply to her charge attacks, and the 20% is actually based off her attack, and it can be triggered by teammates' damageless attacks. This extra Electro also abides by the regular ICD. C5 increases the level of her burst by 3, and C6 decreases the electro resistance of surrounding enemies by 15% for the entire duration of Beidou's burst when it's active. So looking at Beidou's kit, it's easy to see that she is sort of the other half of the Electro sub DPS coin. While Fischl is single target and really hones in on an enemy to deal quick and rapid attacks, Beidou is a lot more spread out and fares a lot better when there are more enemies at a time. All in all, her damage doesn't suck, and her kit is really complete, with her constellations just enhancing the power she already has. However, the reason she isn't a must-build, quote-unquote, is that her DPS just falls off a lot in single-target situations. Her burst cannot trigger its lightning discharge jumping when it's on one opponent only. Again, like Thoma, there really isn't anything wrong with Beidou's kit. In fact, there's really nothing to fault with her kit. It's just simply the amount of enemies that presents an issue, giving her inconsistency. So those are all the must-build 4 stars from Update 1.0 to 3.6, along with a few honorable mentions. This video took a really long time to make, but I'm happy that it's finally out now. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see more on a regular basis, you know what button to click. I don't need to tell you. We've all been on this platform for long enough. And if you have something to say, I can only hope that it's nice. Thank you. Bye!